The Veyari Empire was a place of shining towers, strong warriors, and endless pride. Across the stars, the Veyari were known for their size and their power. Their warriors stood taller than most species, with strong arms and hard voices that carried through great halls. Strength was everything in the empire. To be respected, one had to show power. To be admired, one had to win battles or command great fleets. In this world of towering figures lived Princess Lyra, the youngest daughter of Emperor Kalor. From the day she was born, whispers had followed her. She was small, too small. Her brothers and sisters were tall, broad, and commanding, but Lyra was delicate, almost fragile in the eyes of her people. Though she carried the blood of the emperor, the nobles often looked at her as if she was invisible. At gatherings in the palace, her brothers stood like statues, their voices echoing as they boasted of hunts, duels, and victories. Her sisters shone in robes heavy with jewels, their sharp words like blades that cut through any conversation. But Lyra, with her soft voice and gentle manner, was often left at the edge of the room. Sometimes she tried to join the talk, but her words were brushed aside, drowned beneath louder voices. Sometimes she tried to show interest, but the alien males of her court never looked her way. They passed by her as though she were not there at all. She was a princess, but she was ignored. One evening, as the sons of the empire sat behind the glass domes of the palace, Lyra walked alone in the gardens. The plants glowed faintly with silver light, each one shaped by centuries of careful cultivation. The air was sweet, filled with the soft hum of night insects, yet Lyra felt no joy. Her heart was heavy. She sat on a carved stone bench and watched the stars rise above the palace walls. Somewhere out there, her brothers commanded fleets, her sisters led councils, and her father sat on the throne of power. She, however, had no place. Why was I born this way? She whispered to herself. Her voice was small, almost lost in the sound of the wind. Why do they not see me? Lyra had tried many times to prove herself. She studied hard, learning the history of her people. She memorized maps of the stars. She learned how to speak with kindness and patience, something few in the court bothered to practice, but none of it mattered. In the empire, only strength gained respect, and she had none to show. The next day, the palace prepared for a great gathering. The emperor had called the nobles to the grand hall. There was news from the edge of the galaxy. A new species had arrived. A small species, never before seen in the courts of the Veyari. They called themselves humans. The nobles were curious but mostly amused. What can these humans offer, they said. They are not tall, not strong. They will bow before us. Even Lyra's siblings laughed at the thought. They imagined these humans as weak creatures, barely worth notice. But Lyra, sitting quietly at the edge of the council table, felt something different. She was curious. What if these humans were not as weak as everyone thought? What if their value was not in size but in something else? On the day of the arrival, the palace shone with bright banners and silver armor. The nobles stood tall in their finest robes, their jeweled crowns reflecting the light of the high chandeliers. Lyra stood behind her sisters, dressed in a soft gown of pale blue. She looked small among them, almost hidden. The doors of the great hall opened and the human delegation entered. They were indeed smaller than the Veyari, but their steps were steady, their faces calm. At the front walked Captain Elias Ward, a man with sharp eyes and a quiet strength that did not come from muscle alone. The Veyari nobles looked down on the humans, their smiles full of pride. Some whispered to each other, mocking the humans for their size, but the humans did not seem offended. They bowed politely, offering gifts from their world, crystals shaped by Earth's oceans, music carved into thin plates of silver, and stories carried in their voices. When Elias raised his head, his eyes met those of Lyra for a moment. She was standing half hidden, but he noticed her. Unlike the Veyari males who had never cared to even greet her, Elias gave a small nod. It was a gesture so simple, yet it made her heart stir. Throughout the ceremony, Lyra watched quietly. She noticed how the humans spoke with respect, even when others mocked them. She noticed how Elias listened carefully, never raising his voice but still making sure his words carried weight. And she noticed that unlike the alien males of her own court, he did not ignore her. Later, when the nobles were feasting, Lyra slipped away to the garden once more. She thought she was alone, but soon she heard footsteps. Elias had also stepped outside, perhaps to find peace away from the noise of the hall. When he saw her, he bowed lightly. "Princess," he said in his calm voice. The word struck her like a warm light. No Veyari male ever called her that with true respect, but this human did. "You know who I am?" she asked softly. "Yes," Elias replied. "You are Princess Lyra. I saw you in the hall." Lyra's eyes lowered. "Most do not notice me. Then they are blind," Elias said. His tone was simple, not flattering, but truthful. For a moment, silence hung between them. The night air was cool and the stars glittered above. Lyra felt something she had never felt before, a sense of being seen. "Tell me," she asked, her voice trembling slightly, "what do your people value? In your world, is strength the only thing that matters?" Elias shook his head. "Strength matters, yes, but so do many other things. We value courage, kindness, and the will to keep going, even when the world is against you. On Earth, even the smallest person can change the future if they stand true to themselves." Lyra's heart beat faster. His words sounded like something she had always hoped to hear. Could it be true that size and power were not the only measures of worth? That night, as she returned to her chambers, she felt a strange warmth inside her. For the first time, someone had spoken to her not as a shadow in the corner, not as a weak princess, but as a person with value. The ignored princess of the Veyari Empire had finally been seen. And though she did not yet know it, this small beginning would grow into a bond that would change both her life and the fate of her people. The great hall of the Veyari Palace was alive with noise and pride. Tall figures in shining armor and jewel-covered robes filled the space, their voices echoing against the high crystal walls. The nobles of the empire loved to boast, and today they had a fresh reason to show their pride. For the first time in history, a new species had stepped into their court. Humans, small in size compared to the towering Veyari, yet they carried themselves with calm dignity. The nobles found it amusing. They whispered among themselves, mocking the visitors for their shorter height and leaner bodies. "Look at them," one Veyari lord chuckled to his neighbor. "Are these the creatures who call themselves explorers of the stars?" "Fragile bones," another sneered. "They will never survive in real battle. They belong in books, not on warships." Their laughter carried through the hall, though the humans gave no sign of offense. They stood tall, well, as tall as their bodies allowed, and remained steady. Their leader, Captain Elias Ward, spoke with careful respect, his voice calm, his eyes sharp. Princess Lyra stood behind her sisters, nearly hidden as always. Her gown of pale silver caught a little light, but no one paid attention. Her sisters leaned forward to whisper sharp remarks, their lips curling with disdain at the humans. Her brothers sat with proud grins, their massive shoulders looming like walls. Lyra, however, felt something different. As she studied the humans, she noticed their patience. They did not try to outshout the nobles. They did not shrink away either. They simply stood with quiet confidence, and when Elias spoke, his words were not filled with pride but with thought. He spoke of Earth, their home world. He described blue oceans that stretched endlessly, forests alive with color, and skies filled with storms and stars. His words painted pictures in Lyra's mind. She had read many records of alien worlds, but the way Elias described his planet felt different. It was not only a report. It was love, deep and true. The nobles hardly listened. Some rolled their eyes. Others whispered jokes. But Lyra listened to every word. When the ceremony ended, the feast began. Long tables were covered with glowing fruits, roasted meats, and golden drinks. Veyari nobles filled their plates and filled the air with more talk of victories, battles, and wealth. The humans sat politely, eating little, answering questions when asked but never trying to boast. Lyra's gaze kept drifting to Elias. More than once, she found him looking back at her, not with mockery or pity, but with respect. Once he caught her eyes and gave a small warm nod. It made her heart lift. Later, when the music played and nobles danced in heavy circles, Lyra slipped away to the balcony above the gardens. She needed air, away from the noise. The stars stretched wide above her. From here she could see the glow of distant cities and the faint silver of the Empire's fleet, drifting like shadows in the night sky. She leaned against the railing, her thoughts tangled. Why was she so drawn to these humans? They were strangers, outsiders, smaller than her people, mocked by her family. Yet when she watched them, she saw something the Veyari lacked: humility, patience, and quiet strength. She closed her eyes, and footsteps sounded behind her. Turning, she saw Elias step onto the balcony. He paused when he noticed her. "Forgive me," he said, bowing slightly. "I did not know anyone was here." I will leave if you wish. No, Lyra said quickly, almost surprising herself. You may stay. Elias walked closer, keeping a respectful distance. For a moment they both gazed out at the stars in silence. It is beautiful, Elias said softly. The stars from here look brighter than from Earth. Lyra's lips curved into the smallest smile. You speak as if the stars are friends. Perhaps they are, Elias replied. On Earth, sailors once looked to them for guidance. They trusted the stars to lead them across unknown oceans. Without them, many would have been lost. Lyra turned her gaze back to the sky. Here, the stars are maps of conquest. Each one reminds my people of a war won or a fleet built. She sighed. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else looks at them simply for their beauty. Elias glanced at her. Do you? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but I have never told anyone. They would laugh. They laugh at many things I say. Elias's expression grew firm. Then they are wrong to laugh. A leader who cannot listen to beauty will never see the true worth of life. Lyra's heart tightened at his words. No one in her court had ever spoken to her this way. They spoke of her as weak, unworthy, invisible. But this human, this stranger, spoke to her as though her thoughts mattered. She lowered her eyes. I am a princess, yet I am ignored. My voice carries no weight. My sisters outshine me. My brothers overshadow me. To most, I am nothing. Elias's tone was steady, without hesitation. To me, you are not nothing. You are a person who sees what others miss. That is rare. Silence stretched between them. Lyra felt warmth rising in her chest. She had spent years longing to be noticed, to be valued not for strength of arms but for the strength of her heart. And now, standing under the stars, this human gave her what she had always wished for: respect. From the hall behind them, music and laughter spilled out, but it felt far away. Here on the balcony, the world felt different. Tell me, she asked quietly, what is most valued on Earth? Is it power as it is here? Elias shook his head. Power has its place, but on Earth we admire courage, kindness, and the will to stand for what is right, even when the world is against you. Some of our greatest heroes were not the strongest. Some were farmers, scholars, or even children. Yet they changed history because they believed in something greater than themselves. Lyra's breath caught. His words were like a secret door opening inside her. Could it be true that greatness did not belong only to the strong? Could it belong also to those who saw beauty in stars, who spoke gently instead of shouting? She whispered, In my world, such thoughts are weakness. In my world, Elias said firmly, such thoughts are strength. The princess turned her head, meeting his eyes. They stood in silence, locked in a quiet understanding. At last, Lyra spoke. I do not know why, but when I speak with you, I feel lighter, as if I am no longer invisible. Elias's voice softened. Because you are not invisible, princess, not to me. Her heart beat faster, and for a moment she feared her voice would tremble if she answered. Instead, she let silence say what she could not. From that night, something unspoken grew between them. Lyra began to look forward to each meeting, each chance word, each glance across the hall. She began to wonder if perhaps for the first time, her life was about to change. The ignored princess of the Veyari was beginning to be seen, not by her own people, but by a human who carried a strength far different from theirs. And though the Empire still laughed at the humans, Lyra knew in her heart that Elias's quiet courage was worth more than all the empty boasting in the hall. The days that followed the humans' arrival were filled with meetings, ceremonies, and long councils. The Veyari nobles gathered in glittering halls to discuss trade, alliances, and the balance of power. They spoke loudly, their deep voices filling the chambers, always trying to prove who was stronger, smarter, or richer. For Princess Lyra, these gatherings had always been heavy and cold. She usually sat behind her sisters, quiet and unnoticed, her thoughts drifting far from the proud speeches. But now with the humans present, something felt different. Her eyes often searched the room until they found Captain Elias Ward. He never raised his voice, yet people listened when he spoke. He chose his words with care, answering insults with calm replies, turning harsh questions into gentle discussions. While other nobles tried to make him feel small, Elias never seemed shaken. His quiet confidence reminded Lyra of the steady stars, constant even when storms moved across the sky. One afternoon, after a long council ended, Lyra walked into the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scent of flowering vines, and fountains sang softly among the paths. She often came here to find peace. But this time she was not alone. Elias was there, studying the strange glowing plants with quiet interest. When he saw her, he gave a respectful bow. "Princess," he greeted. "Captain," she replied softly. For a moment she hesitated, then asked, "Do you find our gardens pleasing?" "They are beautiful," Elias said. "Your people shape nature with such care. On Earth our gardens are smaller, but they carry the same purpose, to bring calm to the heart." Lyra tilted her head. "So humans also seek peace and beauty?" "Yes," Elias answered, "many do. Even the strongest of us need moments of silence." His words settled warmly in her chest. Most Veyari nobles considered silence weakness. They filled every space with noise and pride, yet Elias spoke as if quiet had value. They walked slowly along the path, speaking in low voices. Lyra asked about Earth, and Elias described oceans that roared with waves, forests filled with singing birds, and mountains that stood like guardians of the land. His descriptions painted colors in her mind she had never seen. "And your people," she asked, "do they all live as warriors?" Elias shook his head with a small smile. "No, some are warriors, yes, but many are farmers, builders, healers, teachers. Strength takes many forms, princess." His words struck her deeply. In her empire, only warriors were praised. Those who healed or taught were respected but never honored. Could it truly be that a whole world valued many kinds of strength? They paused at a pool where silver fish swam in circles. The water glowed faintly under the sun's light. Lyra knelt beside the pool, her reflection rippling. "Captain," she said quietly, "do you think it is wrong to be different?" Elias looked at her reflection before answering. "No, I think difference is what gives life meaning. If every star in the sky was the same, the heavens would be dull. It is their differences that make them beautiful." Lyra's throat tightened. For so long she had felt her difference as a burden, something that made her less than her siblings. But Elias's words made her wonder if perhaps her difference was not weakness, but something else entirely. From that day, their meetings grew more frequent. Sometimes they spoke in the gardens. Sometimes they found each other during feasts, exchanging quiet words while others shouted over the tables. Once they even met in the palace library, where shelves stretched high with records of the empire. Lyra showed Elias star maps that charted distant systems, her slender finger tracing the glowing lines. Elias listened carefully, asking questions about her knowledge. No one in her court had ever cared to hear her thoughts before. Yet here was a human, listening as if her words mattered more than gold. In return, Elias told her stories of Earth's past. He spoke of explorers who crossed unknown seas, inventors who shaped the future, and leaders who rose not through strength of body but strength of heart. Lyra loved those stories. Each one was like a spark, lighting something inside her. But not everyone in the palace was blind to their growing closeness. Some Veyari nobles began to notice the way Elias bowed to her, the way Lyra's eyes brightened when he spoke. They whispered among themselves, their laughter sharp. "Look," one sneered, "the little princess has finally found someone who sees her, though it is only a small human." "Perhaps that is fitting," another mocked. "Two small creatures together. What can they achieve?" Their cruel words reached Lyra's ears, though she pretended not to hear. The old ache returned to her heart, but when Elias learned of it, his expression grew firm. "Do not let their voices define you," he told her. "They laugh because they cannot understand what they do not have. True strength is not loud, princess. It does not need to shout to be real." His steady gaze made her believe him, at least for a moment. One evening, during another feast, the nobles grew loud with pride again. They boasted of battles, waved their cups high, and sang of victories. A few turned their words against the humans, mocking them for their size. Elias rose calmly and addressed the hall. "We humans are not as tall as you," he said, his voice even. "Our arms may not match your warriors, but strength is not measured by size alone. We survive storms, we endure trials, and we build futures with our hands. If strength were only in height, the tallest tree would rule the forest. Yet it is the smallest seed that can break stone and grow into a new world." The hall fell silent for a moment. Some nobles laughed again, but others frowned, troubled by his words. Lyra, hidden among her sisters, felt pride rise in her chest. He had spoken with courage, not for himself alone, but for the truth. That night, Lyra dreamed of seeds breaking stone, of stars shining brighter because they were different. When she woke, she knew something had changed inside her. She no longer wished to be like her siblings. She no longer wished to be invisible. She wanted to be herself fully and without shame, and she knew Elias had given her the strength to begin. But she also knew the whispers of the nobles would not stop. Some already looked at her with suspicion, as if her bond with a human was a kind of weakness. They did not understand, and perhaps they never would. Yet as long as Elias saw her, as long as he treated her with respect, she felt she could endure. The ignored princess of the Veyari was beginning to find her voice, and with it, a bond that crossed the wide gulf between two worlds. The palace of the Veyari Empire had never been so restless. Messengers rushed through the shining halls, their footsteps quick, their faces tense. Nobles gathered in circles, their voices sharp with worry. Even the emperor's throne room, usually calm like a mountain, was filled with the noise of anxious talk. The reason was clear. News had arrived from the edge of the empire. Pirates had attacked the trade routes, bold and merciless. Ships had been captured, supplies stolen, and whole outposts threatened. These pirates were not ordinary raiders. They were skilled and cunning, striking before fleets could react. The emperor rose from his throne, his towering figure wrapped in heavy robes of gold. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The honor of the empire has been challenged. We will not allow pirates to weaken us. I call for a trial of courage. Let those who claim strength step forward and defend our people." The nobles cheered loudly, their pride burning bright. Many boasted of what they would do. Some pounded their armored chests, declaring that they would crush the pirates in days. Others promised to bring back trophies of victory. The hall rang with loud voices and grand promises. Lyra sat quietly among her sisters, listening. Her hands rested in her lap, her eyes lowered. But in her heart a spark had begun to burn. She thought of Elias's words, that strength was not only in size, but in courage, kindness, and truth. She thought of the humans who stood calmly even when mocked. And she wondered, could she also prove herself? Captain Elias Ward stood among the human delegation. He studied the nobles carefully. Their voices were full of pride, but he saw something else in their eyes, hesitation. They were quick to boast, but would they act when real danger came? When the hall grew quiet, Elias stepped forward. His voice was steady. "Emperor Kalor, if it pleases you, the humans will also stand in this trial. We will not boast of our size or power, but we will show our courage with action." A wave of laughter rolled through the nobles. Some slapped their knees, others shook their heads. The humans. One sneered. "What can they do against pirates? They are smaller than us." Another shouted, "Will they scare the pirates with words?" But the emperor raised his hand, silencing the noise. His sharp eyes studied Elias. For a long moment the hall was quiet. Then the emperor spoke. "Very well. Let the humans join this trial. The pirates will not be defeated by boasting. Let us see who among us carries true courage." The nobles murmured in surprise, but none dared argue with the emperor. That night, as the palace lights dimmed, Lyra walked into the garden where she often met Elias. He stood by the fountain, his eyes fixed on the sky. "You will join the trial," she said softly. "Yes," Elias replied. "It is the right thing to do. But the pirates are dangerous. They will not fight with honor." Elias turned to her. His face was calm, yet his eyes shone with determination. "That is why we must stop them. If no one acts, more lives will be lost." Lyra's hands tightened around the folds of her gown. For so long she had been afraid of being weak. But now she feared something else, that Elias would risk his life while she stood by unseen and useless. "Then I will go too," she said suddenly. Elias blinked. "Princess, I am tired of being ignored," Lyra interrupted, her voice trembling but firm. "If courage is more than size, then I must show it. I cannot always hide in the shadows." Elias studied her for a long moment. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "If you are certain, then I will not stop you. But you must be ready. The trial will test more than words." Lyra lifted her chin. "I am ready." The next morning, ships of the trial gathered at the empire's edge. Sleek vessels of the Veyari stood side by side with the smaller but clever ships of the humans. Crews prepared weapons, checked systems, and whispered about the danger ahead. Lyra stepped aboard a vessel with Elias and his team. The humans welcomed her with respect, not mockery. They explained the ship's systems, showed her how to watch the sensors, and treated her as a true member of the crew. For the first time, she felt she belonged. The mission began. At first, the space ahead seemed empty, Only stars and darkness stretching wide, but soon alarms rang. The pirates appeared, their ships dark and sharp like blades against the light. The Veari nobles rushed forward eagerly, firing weapons without thought. Their voices filled the channels with loud commands. But the pirates moved swiftly, dodging attacks, striking back with sudden bursts of fire. 2 Veari ships were damaged quickly, their boasting voices replaced with fear. Elias kept his crew calm. "Hold steady. Do not waste fire. Watch their pattern." Lyra sat by the sensors, her eyes scanning the glowing lines. She noticed something. The pirates always circled before striking, leaving a small gap in their movement. Her heart beat fast. Could she speak up? Would they listen? "Captain," she said, her voice low but clear. "There is a gap here." She pointed to the display. "If we move now, we can cut across their path." Elias leaned over, studied the screen, then gave a sharp nod. "She's right. Helm, take us there." The ship turned swiftly, slipping into the pirates' blind spot. Their weapons fired, striking true. One pirate ship faltered, its engines sparking. The crew cheered. Elias looked at Lyra, his eyes filled with pride. "Well done, Princess." Her cheeks warmed, but she felt stronger than ever. For once, her voice had changed the course of battle. As the fight continued, the humans used clever tactics instead of brute force. They dodged, tricked, and trapped the pirates. Lyra gave suggestions when she saw openings, and each time the crew listened. Slowly, the balance shifted. The pirates, once confident, began to retreat. The Veari nobles, who had rushed in with pride, were stunned to see the humans and the small princess leading the turn of the fight. At last, the final pirate ship fled into the dark. The trial was over. The trade routes were safe again. When the ships returned to the Empire, the nobles gathered once more in the Great Hall. Their voices were quieter now, their pride dimmed by the memory of their near defeat. The Emperor stood tall, his gaze sweeping the room. "The pirates have been driven back not by loud boasting but by courage and wisdom. Today, those who were overlooked have shown true strength." All eyes turned to the humans, and then to Lyra. For the first time in her life, the court looked at her not with pity or dismissal, but with recognition. She had been part of victory. She had been seen. But Lyra's gaze went to Elias. He had believed in her when no one else did, and she knew this was only the beginning. The ignored princess had stepped into courage, and the Empire would never see her the same way again. The halls of the Veari palace were quieter now, but the air was thick with tension. Word of the recent trial of courage had spread like wildfire. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, their voices heavy with surprise and, for some, jealousy. For the first time, the smallest princess of the Empire was being noticed, not for her size, but for her courage. Princess Lyra walked through the halls with her head held higher than she ever had. She no longer felt invisible. She had been part of a victory that would be remembered in the Empire's history, and yet the attention brought new challenges. Many nobles looked at her with eyes that measured worth in ways she had learned to distrust. Some praised her, but others tried to claim her fame as if she owed them respect now. Her heart was not troubled by them. She had learned the true measure of strength, and it was not in loud voices or tall stature. It was in courage, kindness, and the choice to stand for what mattered. She found Captain Elias waiting in the garden, as he often did after the day's events. The silver light of the twin moons bathed the fountains in a gentle glow. Lyra felt calm here, with him, away from whispers and expectations. "Princess," Elias said, bowing slightly, "the court is restless tonight." "I know," Lyra replied. "They do not understand. Some think I am brave only because of my new attention, but I know the truth now. Courage is not about how others see you." Elias smiled, his calm presence giving her strength. "You have shown the Empire something very few understand. You acted when it mattered, and you listened when others could not. That is courage." Lyra looked down at her hands, then raised her gaze to meet his. "I could not have done it without you." Elias's expression softened. "You could have. I only guided. The choice to act was yours." The night stretched quietly around them. Somewhere in the palace, music drifted softly. But here, among the glowing fountains and the soft hum of night air, Lyra felt at peace. But peace alone could not silence the murmurs that would soon reach the ears of every noble in the Empire. Rumors spread of her bond with a human. Some spoke with curiosity, some with ridicule, and others with thinly veiled anger. They could not understand that a choice of heart and respect mattered more than wealth or height. The next day, the emperor summoned the court. The nobles gathered once more, but this time their faces were wary. Some smiled politely, masking their judgment. Others avoided looking at Lyra directly, as if her bravery had made them unsure of how to act. The emperor's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "We have seen the trial of courage. We have witnessed acts that prove true strength is not always in size, wealth, or position. Today we recognize those who acted with honor and skill." All eyes turned to Lyra and the humans. Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their own boasting had done little against the pirates. Lyra stood proudly, feeling the weight of recognition for the first time, but also the freedom to choose her own path. Then the emperor's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter. "Lyra," he said, "you have proven yourself not only in courage but in wisdom. And now, as a princess of the Veyari, it is your choice to make a decision that will define your path forward." A hush fell over the hall. Every noble leaned forward. Even her siblings, proud and tall, looked at her curiously. Lyra took a deep breath. This moment was hers, not theirs. She thought of the nobles who had ignored her for so long. She thought of the whispers that had followed her since childhood. She thought of her brother's pride, her sister's sharp words, and the long years she had spent feeling small. But most of all, she thought of Elias, the human who had treated her with respect, who had listened to her when no one else did, who had fought alongside her when the Empire faced danger. Stepping forward, she lifted her head and addressed the court. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the hall. "I have been overlooked for my size. I have been ignored for my quiet words. Many have only seen me when I gained attention through the bravery of others. But I know now what true value is." She paused, letting the silence fill the space around her. Nobles shuffled in their seats, unsure of where this speech would lead. "I have seen courage, respect, and wisdom in someone who does not look like us. He is not tall, nor does he boast of power. Yet he has guided me, protected me, and listened to my words. And that is why I choose him, not because he is strong in the eyes of the Empire, but because he is strong in heart and mind." Gasps ran through the hall. Some nobles whispered sharply, others stared in disbelief. Her siblings looked at her with surprise, their pride unsure of how to react. Elias stepped forward, his calm eyes meeting hers. He bowed slightly, not in submission but in respect. "Princess Lyra," he said softly, "I accept your choice not as a privilege but as a partnership. Together we will face what comes next with courage and honor." The emperor studied them both. For a moment silence held the hall. Then he nodded. "So be it. If a princess of the Veyari sees worth in someone who acts with courage and respect, then the Empire will honor that choice." Relief and joy flooded Lyra's heart. She had chosen her own path, guided by truth, not by expectation. She had been ignored for too long, but now she was seen, and not just for her actions, but for who she was. The nobles murmured among themselves. Some remained skeptical, others curious, but no one could deny the truth of what they had witnessed. Lyra had acted with courage, she had spoken with wisdom, and she had chosen someone not by appearance or status, but by character. That night, as the palace rested under the glow of the moons, Lyra and Elias walked together in the gardens. The fountains reflected their figures, small and tall, side by side. "You were brave today," Elias said softly. Lyra smiled. "I only acted because you showed me what courage truly is." He shook his head gently. "No, you acted because you chose to see yourself differently. I only walked beside you." They paused at a fountain where silver fish swam in quiet circles. Lyra reached out, her hand brushing the water, sending ripples across the surface. "I will not be invisible again," she said. "Nor should you," Elias replied. "The Empire has seen what you are capable of. And so have I." In that moment, Lyra felt a strength she had never known. Not the strength measured by muscle or height, but the strength of heart, mind, and choice. She had been ignored for too long. Yet now she stood recognized, respected, and free to choose her own future. The story of the small princess of the Veyari Empire would be remembered, not for her size, but for her courage, her wisdom, and her choice. And as she walked alongside a human who valued her for who she was, she knew that the future held endless possibilities, adventures beyond the stars, challenges to face, and a life built on respect, partnership, and true strength. For the first time in her life, she felt completely herself, and no one could take that away.